Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari-chan, and welcome back to my channel. I've been saying YouTube, forgetting that, yes, I'm putting this stuff on Patreon as well. Anyway, like I said, welcome. We are continuing with another reading of Remnants of Filth, Volume 1, also known as Yooeh by Rou Bao or Meat Bun. And today we've got a lot of ground to cover as we are on a Monday, so we're doing chapters 21 through 25. Unless for some reason I get gusto and we do an extra chapter. Anyway, I hope you all enjoy or suffer, whichever one you feel like. Chapter 21. Have mercy. Mo-Xi didn't spare her a glance. He continued to stare murderously into Goo Mahn's eyes. The official knew Mo-Xi's temper was fierce and that he was unpredictably impulsive, so she didn't hold back a cry of warning. Shizun! Still, Mo-Xi said nothing, as if he was enduring something with all his might. Only after several long moments did he loosen his grip, letting Goo Mahng fall to his knees in the snow. He turned to look at the wind-blown flurries, and his vision gradually blurred. The official let out a breath of relief and made obeisance once more. Many thanks for Shihajun's understanding. Mo-Xi stood quiet in the heavy snow, his back to the crowd and his hands clasped behind him. But as the official moved to help Goo Mahng up from where he had fallen in the snow, Mo-Xi turned his face, his voice low and muted. Hold it. What is Shihajun's command? I will go as well, Mo-Xi said. Startled, the official replied, Powerful cultivators cannot be present in numbers during Shenlong Terrace's examination in case of fluctuations in the flow of spiritual energy. Even if you come, you'll have to wait outside the hall. Very well. Mo-Xi still hadn't turned. His tone was terrifyingly stiff, each syllable bitten out. Then I will wait outside. Any further attempt to dissuade him would have been inappropriate for someone of her station. Thus, the official took Goo Mahng back toward the palace of Chonghua. Mo-Xi followed in their wake. Approximately 2 hours later, snowy owls were sent out from the palace, urgently summoning every important official to come forth and confer. It was the dead of night, and this imperial order had pulled almost every high-ranking member of the court from their beds. Elder Yooeh of Qingqian Terrace had the worst luck. This asshole just so happened to be enjoying the pleasures of a brothel in the northern quarter of the city, and right at the crucial moment, a fat bird crashed through the window screen. Hoot! An order from His Imperial Majesty! An order from His Imperial Majesty! It shrieked. Every high-ranked official is requested to come to the throne room at once to discuss Goo Mahn's case. Elder Yooeh promptly wilted. Wasn't his case dealt with ages ago? He cursed as he dressed. How has something come up all of a sudden? Aya, Your Excellency, don't be upset. A woman clad in scanty and sensual garb rose from the bed to help him dress. If His Imperial Majesty has sent an urgent summons, he must have his reasons. Reasons, my ass! It's so late! He doesn't give us a moment's rest! The woman pressed supple fingers to the elder's lips as she smiled wearily. Your Excellency shouldn't say such things. The walls have ears. What do I have to be scared of? I'm only saying these things to you. Elder Yooeh rolled his eyes. The current emperor does what he wants when he wants. This isn't the first time he's hauled us out in the dead of night. He's young and vigorous, but doesn't stop to think about our old bones. We can't handle this kind of excitement. Your Excellency, what are you saying? The woman gently scolded. You're always so fierce with me. It's more than I can take. If your bones are old, what does that make me? These words couldn't have been any more insincere. Elder Yooeh had quite obviously just withered. But he ate her words up, chuckling as he pinched her powdered cheeks and kissed her nape once more. I'm off, he said. Little darling, I'll come see you again tomorrow. The woman giggled girlishly and saw him out, naturally making a great show of being unwilling to let him go. The moment the door closed, however, her face fell. Old trash, she spat. Can't get it up, and looks like a damn toad that's taken a dung bath. I sure as hell wouldn't be serving you if you weren't so rich. She moved briskly behind a screen to bathe herself and change into clean clothes, then sat at the dressing table to redo her makeup. The woman had been at this brothel for many years and had long since left her youthful beauty behind, but she was good in bed and willing to put up with a great deal. She always did her best to serve her clients no matter how revolting she found them, never letting her honorable guests see any trace of discomfort. That was why a number of old customers who were getting on in years still flocked to her. Those younger maidens are so fickle. They don't say anything, but you could see it in their eyes. You're the best, Yooeh, honest and sincere. Anytime Elder Yooeh and his ilk said such things to her, she was secretly cackling. Yooeh was neither honest nor sincere. After working in this kind of place for more than a decade, her face had become caked with thick makeup that she could never take off, and she had developed and refined her skills to perfection. With each arched brow and smiling glance, she concealed every hint of her true feelings, even when she was about to die from disgust. How else could she compete with those tender, supple young bodies? Yooeh faced the bronze mirror and carefully traced over the lips that Elder Yooeh had kissed of their color. She picked up her lip paper and pursed her lips over the small sheet of dark crimson silk as she sat to wait for her second client of the night to push open the door. She didn't wait long before the rosewood door creaked open. Yooeh hastily pasted on her warmest expression, smiling as she looked up to greet her guest. Gonza, you... When she laid eyes on the newcomer's face, she seemed to lose her voice. After a few beats of silence, her vermilion lips parted into a terrible scream. The man at her door was soaked in blood. This man was covered in bandages, and his eyes were thoroughly bloodshot. Scarlet drenched his hands, and a sticky eyeball was impaled on a finger of his left hand. He glanced at her. "Don't scream," he rasped. Then he slowly walked in, lifted his hand to stuff the eyeball into his mouth, and chewed it a little before swallowing. It seemed that for him, eating an eyeball was akin to imbibing a holy medicine. An expression of bliss suffused his face. He licked his lips and slowly turned to look at Yooeh. "Get me a pot of tea," he said. When Yooeh made no move, his tone grew impatient. "Go get me a pot of tea." "Tea? What tea?" Scared out of her wits, Yooeh slid from the embroidered bench with a thump, her body convulsing uncontrollably. She wanted to get back up, but her hands and feet were ice cold, completely unresponsive, incapable of aught but quaking. She shook for a spell, then let out a mad, blood-curdling scream and staggered toward the door. "Help! Help me! There's a ghost! Ah, a ghost!" Elder Yooeh had just left, and as she thought of him now, he really did seem tall, mighty, and fierce. She began to shriek hysterically, "Elder! Elder Yooeh!" Yooeh burst through the door with a crash, stumbling as she tried to run out. Strangely, the eyeball-eating man didn't move a mote, as if he didn't care where she ran off to. Blood-stained lips parted to reveal a mouth of flashing teeth, and he leered cruelly. "Elder! Ah!" Yooeh reached the stairway. When she saw the scene below, her legs gave out. She collapsed heavily, without the strength to rise. At some point, the entire first floor, all the way to the wooden stairs, had been covered in corpses. The only exception was the center of the brothel's hall, where a handful of prostitutes huddled together, terrified out of their wits, their pretty faces awash in tears. An important official, Elder Yooeh of Chengqian Terrace, lay dead on one of the tables, 2 bloody holes where his eyes had once been. Yooeh shook her head again and again. No, no. Why hadn't the Imperial Guards noticed such a terrible event? Why hadn't Yooeh heard any screaming when she had been only a wall away? A leisurely voice spoke from behind her, as if its owner had read her mind. It's not like the nation of Chonghua is the only one with secret techniques. If I don't want anyone to hear me, I have no shortage of methods to employ. Footsteps echoed. The man wrapped in bandages stepped out from the shadows, holding a teapot patterned with peonies. Tilting his head back, he poured a good half of it down his throat. He gurgled and swallowed, then carelessly tossed the pot away. It crashed to the floor and shattered. You don't need to be afraid. I won't kill you, yet. The man stepped forward and grabbed Yooeh-ning's hair, yanking her down the wooden stairs to throw her toward the other lucky survivors. Then he pulled up a chair, unhurried, sat down in front of them, and looked them over one by one through bloodshot eyes. After a long interval, he said, I want all of you to look at each other's faces. I'll give you an instant's time. With that, he waved a hand from where he sat, and the brothel's doors slammed shut. With another wave, 3 of the corpses rose from the ground, including Elder Yooeh's. They limped, stooped and unsteady, toward the middle of the hall. Among the women, Yooeh was the only one who could still speak. It seemed the others were so frightened that their souls had fled their bodies. What do you... You mean to ask, what do I want with you? The man spoke for her, then laughed derisively. Didn't I already say it? I'm giving you an instant's time to look at each other's faces. But then what? Then what? The man carelessly stroked his chin, taking a moment to think. It was as if this extremely simple question had stumped him. At this point, the 3 corpses had drawn near the women, and the eyeless Elder Yooeh reached out to take Yooeh-ning's arm. No! Yooeh screamed in terror. Don't touch me! Don't touch me! He's scaring you? The man asked lazily, turning to look at Elder Yooeh. Old geezer, you're dead already. How come you haven't stopped groping people? Elder Yooeh looked up and emitted a gurgling noise, as if he were piteously trying to explain something to the man. The man snorted twice. With a wave of his hand, a burst of black teeth swept out to strike Elder Yooeh in the forehead. The old man went limp and fell to the floor, spasming and convulsing before ultimately melting into a puddle of gore. So much babble. So annoying. The other 2 corpses seemed to sense something in this. Their footsteps became even stiffer, their movements more cautious. In the end, they slowly dragged 6 chairs over and carefully placed them next to the brothel girls before bowing. Please, take a seat, the man said. If it weren't for the fact that he was covered in blood and had just orchestrated this entire evil scene, his tone could have been considered courteous. What? Do you need a hand? Though the girls were terrified out of their wits, they could hear what he said. Yet they seemed to be frozen. Only after a long while did they muster the strength to clamber upright, shaking with fear. Each of them sat on a table, unwilling to let either the bandaged man or the 2 corpses touch them. Who are you? Yooeh said, choking up. No need to be hasty, the man said. Once you do as I say and answer a few of my questions, I'll let you know, of course. He thought for a moment. Oh, right. As a reminder, don't go hoping anyone will come rescue you. I've cast a barrier on the door. No one will find out about this anytime soon. He slowly turned his head, gazing toward the tightly closed brothel doors. He licked his lips, the red in his eyes deepening, and laughed. Shall we get started? Perhaps Laurel May Pavilion had drawn away the Imperial Guard's attention, or perhaps the bandaged man's secret techniques were as powerful as he claimed. For the time being, just as he said, not a soul knew what was happening in the north quarter of the city. Chonghua's imperial capital was yet peaceful. High-level cultivators, each the occupant of a key ministry position, arrived on the imperial steps one after another. Morsi had already been waiting outside the throne room for a long time. Once Murong Lian arrived, he refused to stand anywhere else, insisting on the spot right next to Morsi. In the wind and snow, Morsi's side profile seemed even sharper and more grave. Murong Lian glanced at him, then looked forward again. "Shizun, have you really waited in this heavy snow all this time?" he murmured mockingly. Morsi made no sound, quietly letting the snow blanket his shoulders. Murong Lian watched for a while, but when it was clear Morsi had no plans to respond, he spoke again. "On that note, let me ask you something. When you lost your temper outside Leeway Pavilion, was it because you realized Goo Mahn's mind might not really be damaged?" Morsi closed his eyes, a faint darkness creeping over his face. But Murong Lian had no tact. He continued without reservation. "Would you really have choked him to death if no one had intervened?" "From what I know about you, I doubt it." Morsi remained silent. "The two of you—" Finally, Morsi wheeled around and snapped, "Murong Lian, are you done?" The snowy night was still, the atmosphere outside the hall solemn. Shizun's outburst frightened every cultivator on the scene. They craned their necks to peer toward the source. Murong Lian's pride had been dented, and his face flushed green, then pale, in bursts. Right as he opened his mouth to say something, the red lacquered doors opened, and a messenger official emerged to perform obeisance to these important officials. "Honored Shenzhen, His Imperial Majesty invites you in." Murong Lian ground his teeth. Just you wait," he snarled. Morsi swept furiously forward, the dagger at his waist flashing as he left Murong Lian behind. Chapter 22. Fighting Over Him. The great hall was filled with candlelight, and the stout coal brazier within burned merrily. Flanking the brazier were a pair of auspicious beast statues that had been enchanted to move. One functioned as a bellows, opening its mouth to shout, "His Imperial Majesty awes the 9 provinces," as it made the fire blaze more brightly. The other shouted, "His Imperial Majesty's fortune floods the heavens," as it opened its mouth wide to inhale the rising smoke into its belly. Murong Lian had gifted these 2 boot-licking golden beasts to the emperor, who loved them deeply. But Morsi's opinion was that only the mentally impaired could find joy in such garbage. At present, these 2 bootlickers had just finished their inhale and exhale routine, and they let out twin metallic belches before curling up by the brazier and falling still. Morsi glanced across the palace hall. Almost every Shenong Terrace healer was present. Goo Mahng was restrained in the middle of the hall, guarded by the elite cultivators of the palace. Someone had put him under a hypnosis spell, and he was presently unconscious. The emperor was reclining on the pale yellow cushions of the imperial throne, wearing black robes and the beaded imperial crown. His face was jade-like in its beauty, his features exuding a clear willfulness. He had been resting with his eyes closed, but upon the rustling of robes and hurried footsteps, he opened them and glanced down. "Everyone's here?" "Your Imperial Majesty, Elder Yooeh of Qingqian Terrace has not yet arrived," an official replied. The emperor scoffed. "The old geezer's getting on in years. Not even a snowy owl messenger can wake him. We think it's high time the leadership of Qingqian Terrace goes to someone more worthy." "Your Imperial Majesty, please calm yourself." "Do you think we aren't calm?" The emperor rolled his eyes and sat up straight. With a wave of his pale yellow sleeves, he said, "Gentlemen, take your seats." "Our thanks to your Imperial Majesty," the entire hall intoned. "We understand your displeasure to be called to the palace in the middle of the night. Perhaps you're even secretly cursing our name." One of the old nobles had barely sat down before this statement made him fall in haste to his knees. "Ooh, what is your Imperial Majesty saying?" All right, get up. Don't give us that load about emperors needing to set an example for their subjects. It's so annoying. If you want to curse us, then curse away. As long as you don't let us hear it, you can curse to your heart's content." A few old nobles looked at each other. This youthful emperor of theirs was possessed of a strange and intractable temperament, which to a one they found unfathomable. Although he manifestly shared sentiments with the conservative senior nobles, to the point that he had removed Chonghua's greatest slave-born general not long after his ascension, his manner was consistently unorthodox, and he approached every situation as if determined to establish a new world order. "We know you want to get out of here to go back to sleep, mollify your women, and visit your prostitutes," the emperor said wearily. "We will be brief." They were struck speechless. This was simply absurd. Did any other emperor in the 9 provinces and 28 nations behave like this? "Elder of Shennong Terrace, the subject is here. Report on Goo Mahn's condition tonight, as well as the results of the examination." "Understood." The leader of Shennong Terrace stepped forward, made an obeisance, and relayed his account of how Goo Mahn's spiritual energy had suddenly gone berserk. Then he said, "The spiritual core inside Goo Mahng has indeed been broken. He has no spiritual energy, but—" "But what?" the emperor asked. The healer lowered his head. "We found powerful malevolent qi in his chest." The emperor mulled it over. "Malevolent qi. Yes, this official has determined that Goo Mahng became frenzied due to this malevolent qi. Unfortunately, Chonghua has always followed the righteous path and has no contact with immoral demonic ways, so Shennong Terrace's knowledge of such things is limited. All we can say for certain is that the Liao kingdom must have done something to Goo Mahng's heart. But to acquire further details, I'm afraid we'd—" His expression was harrowed, his voice trailing off. "You don't need to be afraid," the emperor said. "Just say it." The healer made further obeisance. "I'm afraid we'd need to wait for Goo Mahng to die in order to dissect his heart," he said. "You mean if we wanted to know what's wrong with him right away, we'd need to kill him right now?" The healer hesitated. "Yes." "Useless trash!" the emperor spat. The Shennong Terrace elder fell to his knees in terror. "Your Imperial Majesty, this official is incompetent." "You are indeed. What would we want with a corpse? He's riddled with traces of the Liao kingdom's magic. So long as he's alive, we can study him. What use is he dead? So we can bury him for the fun of it? Your Imperial Majesty, find another way." But Goo Mahn's mind is broken," the Shennong Terrace elder said. "Hardly any traces of those magic techniques remain, and I'm afraid—" It was then that Murong Lian lazily raised his voice. "Elder, whether Goo Mahng is in fact mentally broken is still yet to be determined." He flicked his eyes over to cast Mo Xi a meaningful glance. "Isn't that right, Shih-jun?" Mo Xi said nothing. The elder swallowed with difficulty. It was already terrifying to be called useless trash by the emperor, but now Wang Shizun was interrupting him, and the ruthless killer Shih-jun had gotten involved too. He felt like he was about to faint. Only after stuttering for several seconds did the elder manage to speak. But this official has examined him multiple times. Goo Mahng truly can't remember anything. His nature is completely bestial. Why would Shih-jun suggest that his mind is intact?" Mo Xi replied. Goo Mahng was able to summon a demonic weapon. The Shennong Terrace elder let out a sigh of relief. "Shih-jun misunderstands," he said hastily. "Although it is often said that summoning either holy or demonic weapons requires reciting an incantation, that isn't necessarily true. When its owner's emotions are exceptionally strong, or if they're in a very dangerous situation, the weapon still may be summoned, even without the incantation. So that does not prove anything." Mo Xi listened without making a sound. His expression was frosty, but his eyes stared unblinkingly at the unconscious Goo Mahng. Mo Xi looked perfectly unruffled. No one had seen that his grip on the sandalwood armrest had left a hairline crack in the wood. Another noble spoke from among the group. "Your Imperial Majesty, regardless of all else, Goo Mahng is simply too dangerous. If not for the timely arrival of the guards today, I'm afraid he would have killed many more people." "That's right. Think of the sins he's committed. Why has your Imperial Majesty continued to extend mercy? Why not kill him and be done with it?" Murong Lian's sort, who believed it was more interesting to keep people alive to torture them, were in the minority. The majority still held the primitive rules, an eye for an eye, a life for a life. Many nobles had blood feuds with Goo Mahng, and they couldn't let an opportunity like the one that had presented itself today pass them by. Cries of, "Execute Goo Mahng at once!" filled the hall. The emperor twirled a string of jade beads on his hand, then smashed it down onto the sandalwood table. "What are you yammering on about?" he bellowed. The crowd fell silent at once. "What a racket! First the harem won't shut up, and now it's the court's turn. We've got a headache coming on." The emperor pointed at the Shennong Terrace elder. "You're nothing more than useless trash. If it weren't for Jiang Fuli's refusal to take your position, we would have fired you 1,000 times over." The Shennong Terrace elder could have cried. His was a difficult and unrewarding position to start. If it weren't for Jiang Fuli's refusal to take his position, he would have begged to resign 1,000 times over, too. The emperor cooled down somewhat and abruptly turned to another official. "When is Jiang Fuli coming back?" he asked. The official fell to his knees. "Your Imperial Majesty, this official is also useless trash. This official doesn't know where Medicine Master Jiang has gone." "Enough! You can get up." The emperor waved a hand, impatient. "At least you're not useless trash. Jiang Fuli is hard to keep track of. If you don't know, forget it." The official was close to tears. "Many thanks to your Imperial Majesty." The emperor looked up at his crowd of subjects. "If we wanted to kill the traitor Goo Mahng, we could have done so 2 years ago. We obviously have our own reasons for keeping him alive thus far." It was clear that some nobles still wanted to speak. "Hold your tongues," the emperor warned testily. "Let us finish. We are aware many of your friends and family have had the misfortune of falling by Goo Mangh's hand, and that you want to deal with him once and for all. That way, your hatred will be avenged. However, aside from retribution, Chonghua wouldn't gain the slightest advantage from that vengeance. So, we will keep Goo Mahng alive. Though the marks left on him are too faint for Shennong Terrace to glean any useful information, Jiang Fuli might be able to accomplish what Shennong Terrace cannot. If there's anything Jiang Fuli cannot accomplish now, he might still be able to in the future. We can wait." After a moment, he continued, his tone severe. "The memories Goo Mahng lost are useful. The spells on Goo Mangh's body are useful. Goo Mahng himself is far more useful alive than dead. Chonghua has never cultivated the demonic path and only employs proper techniques to sustain our cultivation. However, if we fail to even try to understand them, if we refuse to make progress or to gain intelligence about the Liao Kingdom," he sneered, "then we think, sooner or later, Chonghua will be no match for Liao." The emperor wanted to study the demonic path of the Liao Kingdom? An array of different expressions crossed the faces of those gathered. "But how can Chonghua dabble in dark magic? Even if we do it to know our enemy, it's still outrageously dangerous." One of the nobles present was the elder brother of the emperor's favored concubine. Being exceptionally stupid, he couldn't help but ask, "Your Imperial Majesty, if you want to understand the Liao Kingdom's black magic, can't you just take a few more captives? Why does it have to be this one?" The emperor rolled his eyes. "Because the Liao Kingdom has already poured so much effort into him. He is unique. How hasn't that sheer idiocy of yours killed you yet?" At that, everyone fell silent. After a spell, Murong Lian rose and bowed to the throne. "Since your Imperial Majesty has explained his reasoning to us," he said, "this subject naturally won't object. It's only that—" "Speak." "Today's events demonstrated that the malevolent qi in Goo Mangh's body is extremely potent, capable of breaking through the protective barrier outside Luomei Pavilion. It is no longer safe to keep him there." He paused. "If your Imperial Majesty can trust this subject, why not let me take Goo Mahng into the custody of my manor? This subject will keep strict watch over him as atonement for allowing this day's disaster to unfold." The emperor thought this over, looking weary. This could be a solution. Many thanks to your Imperial Majesty, Murong Lian said. Then, before he could finish, a low voice interjected. No. Morsi, who had sat mute with his eyes closed all this time, finally spoke up from his sandalwood chair. He looked up at Wang Shujun and repeated his objection. No, you cannot take him away. At first, the emperor was taken aback. Then he stroked his chin with surprise and interest, looking between Wang Shujun and Shihujun. Murong Lian stiffened, the corners of his mouth curling into a sneer. What special insight does Shihujun possess? Weren't you the one who thought Goo Mahng still might have his memories? I did say that. Morsi rose, his height and the expression on his face both intimidating. So I will take him into custody. Murong Lian's gaze sharpened. Why, exactly? Morsi was curt. Because you can't beat him. You... Morsi turned toward the throne. Your Imperial Majesty, though Goo Mahng has been stripped of much of his power, if he were to go berserk again, he would prove to be as formidable as he was today. That sounds reasonable. You're aware of his martial prowess. In terms of one-on-one fighting, few in Chonghua could best him, Morsi said, cool and steady. I ask your Imperial Majesty to send Goo Mahng to ErHa Manor. I will keep him under total control and prevent him from harming your Imperial Majesty or any other individual in Chonghua ever again. After a moment, Murong Lian smiled contemptuously. Shihujun uses such pretty words. But are we really supposed to believe that you mean to protect Chonghua and his Imperial Majesty? What are you implying? Morsi asked. What am I implying? Murong Lian tilted his pale face as he narrowed his eyes. Does Shihujun truly not understand what I mean? He lowered his chin and gestured in Goo Mahng's direction. By taking him in, wouldn't you only be trying to protect him? What nonsense is this? Morsi's face instantly darkened. Goo Mahng nearly died at my hand not hours ago. You think I'm protecting him? What was that? Nearly? Murong Lian... Sorry. This man... Murong Lian shot him a cool, fluid glance. He's still alive, isn't he? Besides, right outside this hall, when I asked whether you truly wanted to choke Goo Mahng to death with your own hands, did you answer? Morsi replied with barely suppressed rage. Why should I tell you? Whether you wanted to, whether you're willing, yes, why should you tell me? Your relationship with him, your private affairs, why should they be shared with anyone else? My fellow gentlemen are quite forgetful, so why don't I give you all a reminder? Murong Lian's eyes glinted. All those years ago, didn't Shihujun's friendship with General Gu transcend class? This proclamation left the crowd not shocked so much as at a loss for words. Morsi and Goo Mahng had been inseparably close. Everyone knew this. However, it was also common knowledge that Goo Mahng had nearly stabbed Morsi to death after defecting. Since that stab, their relationship had long since passed the tipping point. Everyone was embarrassed. Some people laughed awkwardly without agreeing. Some even said, Wang Shujun, that was ages ago. What more is there to say? But Murong Lian seemed to have expected this response. He snorted indolently, the corners of his mouth curving more dangerously. All right, then I won't speak more on it. He met Morsi's gaze again, smirking. Let me ask Shihujun a question. You've always been ascetic and proper, unsullied by houses of pleasure. So I dare say, what were you after when you secretly visited Luomei Pavilion in search of Goo Mahng, Oh, shoot. Morsi's heart pounded. So that attendant had indeed reported his visit to Luomei Pavilion to see Goo Mahng, but he didn't intend to deny it. Turning his dark eyes away, he said, For revenge. What else? If it was for revenge, why did you personally offer him water to drink and food to eat? Murong Lian savored each word as he hissed them out like a venomous snake. Could it be that seeing your Goo Mahng in pain hurt you? If they hadn't been in the palace of Chonghua with the emperor watching mere feet away, Mo would have pelted Murong Lian with a barrage of fireballs. It was entirely possible that Murong Lian's head would have been smashed right off. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Mo said angrily. "You followed me?" Murong Lian scoffed. "Like I would need to follow you. Leeway Pavilion belongs to me, doesn't it? Moreover, you have only yourself to blame. Could it be that you were afraid people would find out?" As their argument grew heated, one of the nobles tried to intervene. Let it go. Shizun has always been cold of face but kind of heart. He was just giving some water to someone dying of thirst. Wang Shizun, why be so aggressive?" "Just some water." Murong Lian's eyes flashed with a chilling light. Ridiculous. In matters of vengeance, it would be rare enough for someone to resist kicking an already fallen opponent, and here Shizun is offering him aid in a time of need. Such depths of moral righteousness have truly opened my eyes. He bent toward the throne. "Your Imperial Majesty may deny my request to take custody of Goo Mahng, but Shizun must not be allowed to take him back to his manor." It was rare for the emperor to see Mo and Murong Lian argue so heatedly at court. Headache forgotten, he watched with rapt attention. After receiving this request from Murong Lian, he found himself undecided. "Well," he muttered. The emperor's hesitation compelled Murong Lian to continue. "Shizun gave Goo Mahng water even when he was confined at Leeway Pavilion. If Shizun were to take Goo Mahng into his home, who knows what else he would give him?" These words contained a sly hint of innuendo within their derision. Some of the nobles thought Murong Lian was going too far, and they shot meaningful glances his way in an attempt to get him to shut up. Visiting male prostitutes didn't raise eyebrows in Chonghua, but actual relationships between men were wholly forbidden. This was especially true for pure-blooded nobles like Mo. The spiritual energy in their lineage was far too precious to waste. The righteous choice for such men was to carry on their bloodline, so Chonghua forbade them from engaging in unseemly affairs. Furthermore, how could an aloof and noble person like Shizun associate in such a way with filthy, low-born trash like Goo Mahng? The nobles felt this strained belief. They thought that Murong Lian had gotten rather too carried away in his desire to slander his rival. Only Mo, the victim of slander himself, knew the jab had landed. "Shizun, you wouldn't want to raise any questions about your allegiance," Murong Lian drawled. "You'd best stop meddling." After a breath, Mo turned, his expression hostile. He glared at Murong Lian to ask, "And if I refuse?" Chapter 23. Prize. Murong Lian lazily rolled his eyes. Without even turning to look, he smirked and said, "Then Shizun can anticipate further conflict with this lord." Murong Lian's shift in self-address was a transparent attempt to intimidate Mo with this lord's imperial bloodline. Mo was fully aware of this. His expression grew frostier and his aura more terrifying. There were a few beats of silence in the palace hall, a hush that was broken when Mo next spoke. "Remember this. Goo Mahng carries countless secrets and owes countless blood debts. But because of your selfishness, this incident occurred while he was in your custody." Mo paused, his gaze darkening like ice as it shattered. "I will not let you have him. If Wang Shizun has more to say, I wait with bated breath." "You—" Of these two people, one was a prince of the aristocracy, while the other was a general of the military. Their exchanged glance flashed like lightning and disappeared just as quickly. Murong Lian's face was almost translucent in its pallor, the clenching of his jaw extraordinarily stark against his skin. He ground his teeth for a long moment before barking with laughter. "Very well. You still dare to claim you're not protecting him? You dare to claim you hate him?" Murong Lian's eyes glinted like poisoned feather wine, and his smile tightened on his face. Really quick footnote, poison feather wine is Zhenjiu, wine made poisonous with a touch of the mythological Zhen Niao's feather. Niao is bird. Returning to the reading. Morsi, haven't you realized? What you're saying to this lord right now is exactly what Goo Mahng said when you were the one floundering, and he was shielding you. Morsi looked down at Murong Lian calmly, something subtle in his expression. To the claim that you hate Goo Mahng is utterly laughable. If he's handed to you today, sooner or later, calamity will befall Chonghua. Unexpectedly, Morsi started smiling as well. His smile was almost unsettlingly handsome, but his eyes were terribly cold. How did Goo Mahng ever protect me? I only know that he left a scar on my chest that will never fade. I only remember that he tried to kill me. I hate him. Morsi spoke evenly, his eyes as clear as fresh fallen snow. You say he once protected me. My apologies, Wang Shujun, but that happened so long ago. This general doesn't remember anymore. He turned, took a knee before the imperial throne, and lowered his gaze. Your Imperial Majesty, none in Chonghua know Goo Mahng's spells better than I. Moreover, Wang Shujun has failed in his supervisory duties, which resulted in today's disaster. I request to be allowed to detain Goo Mahng and enforce stricter scrutiny upon him in my manner. Murong Lian turned. Morsi, you've been working tirelessly to protect him from the moment you returned, he snapped. What exactly are you planning? Morsi chose not to dignify Murong Lian with any further response. The emperor thought it over. Just as he was about to speak, an imperial guard sprinted to the door and whispered anxiously to the herald. The herald's expression instantly changed as he hurried deferentially up to the throne. Your Imperial Majesty, an urgent report from the capital. The emperor nearly kicked over the table. This is the second time tonight. What now? The herald's face was drained of color. There has been a massacre at the Mansion of Beauties in the Northern Quarter. Almost everyone was killed, including official Yooeh of Chengqian Terrace. What? The crowd was shocked. Even the emperor rose shot up from his throne, wide-eyed. Who is responsible? No one knows. By the time the Imperial Guard discovered the situation at the mansion, the criminal had escaped. They even left a message on the wall. What message? The official was still petrified, and he stammered out his answer. This humble one is lonely, sincerely seeking wives. This humble one is lonely, secretly seeking wives? The emperor repeated it twice, his temper flaring. What nonsense! What deranged old bachelor would write this kind of thing and murder a bunch of people? Does he want to kill, or does he want women? He paused. And when he spoke again, it was in a still more irritable tone. Are there no other clues? Not yet. The emperor once more resorted to his favorite catchphrase. Useless trash! He sank back against the throne and collected himself for a while. His lashes fluttered as his attention fell again on Morsi and Murong Lian. An idea popped into his head. The matter of Goo Mahng will be temporarily set aside. The emperor sat up slowly as he spoke. This Mansion of Beauties incident had come at an inopportune time, but perhaps it could prove useful. Of the two men fighting in front of the hall for control of Goo Mahng, one was a blood relative and the other was an important subject. Nothing good could come of refusing either. This case was the perfect opportunity. He could toss the responsibility of decision to a third party. An atrocity such as this, within the imperial capital, is an insult that cannot be borne. We command the two of you to go forth and investigate at once. Whosoever catches the culprit first may return to ask us for Goo Mahng. Your Imperial Majesty intends to make him a prize? Murong Lian asked. The emperor glanced at him. You two are already at each other's throats merely to settle a personal grudge. Or will he not suffice? Murong Lian smiled. He will. However, While I do this for revenge, Shihajun's motives are yet unknown. Morsi said nothing. Enough, Murong Lian. Shihajun has always been a gentleman. Stop throwing around accusations over some petty grievance. The emperor impatiently waved a hand to cut him off, then pointed at Goo Mahng, asleep within Shennong Terrace's shield array. Shihajun, we also want to see which of you possesses the greater skill, he said. If you have no objections, then let it be done. I accept, Morsi said. Then you should get on with it. The emperor spun the beads in his hand. Whoever wins can take him away. Thus, the still insensible Goo Mahng became the incentive for those two noble lords to crack the case. Murong Lian wanted him to suffer, whereas Morsi wanted... Forget it. He didn't know what he ought to do after bringing Goo Mahng back to his manor either, nor, at present, was it something he ought to think about. Inside the Mansion of Beauties, Morsi, clad in a set of black imperial commander robes, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, gazing at the words scrawled on the wall in fresh blood. At the emperor's command, the healers from Shennong Terrace were handling the corpses that had died tragic deaths within the brothel, while Morsi and Murong Lian had accompanied them to investigate the matter and catch the killer. Among the dead are 14 prostitutes, 37 clients, and 7 mansion employees. One of the healers was giving Morsi the casualty report. After cross-referencing with the directory, we determined that 5 prostitutes are missing. Murong Lian frowned. Missing? Yes. Seeing as everyone in the brothel was killed, and even official Yooeh couldn't escape, those 5 prostitutes can't have gotten away on their own. It's likely that the killer took them away. Murong Lian said thoughtfully. Why did the killer take those 5? Is he really taking women captive to be his wives? Morsi walked to the side of the blood-stained staircase, where a few healers were handling Elder Yooeh's corpse. As he approached, they all performed obeisance. Shihajun. What traces of magic remain on Elder Yooeh's body? Shihajun, they are similar but not identical to the black magic spells of the Liao Kingdom. Please come take a look. As the healer spoke, he lifted a corner of the cloth covering the corpse. Official Yooeh's eyes have been taken and his heart dug out. The flesh around the wounds has festered with unnatural speed, faster than injuries caused by ordinary weapons. In fact, it seems like a cannibalistic, vengeful ghost. Morsi finished with a frown. Yes, it does look like the work of a vengeful ghost. Morsi's gaze swept over the evidence of Elder Yooeh's violent demise. The 2 hollows of his eyes and the hole in his chest had begun to seep black liquid. But vengeful ghosts were rarely lucid, writing something like, "This humble one is lonely, sincerely seeking wives," didn't seem like the behavior of a vengeful ghost. As he thought, his gaze slowly traveled down, stopping at the Elder Yooeh's mutilated chest. Are the other bodies like this as well? The healer flipped through the records and shook his head. No, only 17 people had their eyes and hearts dug out. Show me the names. The first one who had died this way was Elder Yooeh. Morsi wasn't familiar with all the names that followed, but those he did know were young masters from influential families. The ones who lost their hearts were all cultivators? We can't yet be sure, but that seems to be the case. A cultivator's heart was where their spiritual core resided, and after hearts, eyes were the strongest source of spiritual energy. When devoured by vengeful ghosts and demons, these organs could serve as potent cultivation amplifiers. Morsi lowered his head, murmuring to himself in thought. At this moment, an imperial guard pushed open the door. He had been running hard, and despite the cold outside, sweat beaded his forehead. Shihajun, Wang. Footnote 22, Wang is the Chinese onomatopoeia for barking dogs. Murong Lian flicked his peach blossom eyes to the side, smiling with keen interest. Wang, why are you barking? Are you calling our Shihajun a dog? The guard swallowed. Wang Shujun! Murong Lian's smile vanished. Catch your fucking breath before you speak. Yes, sir, the Imperial Guard hastily replied. There's been a new development. After Goo Mahng went berserk, the warning barrier at Luomei Pavilion was broken. Just now, when the manager was accounting for the pavilion's occupants, they discovered someone missing. Murong Lian bristled and grabbed the guard by the lapels. What happened? They checked 3 times and said that despite the chaos, no one escaped. How is someone missing now? The guard didn't get a chance to respond before another team rushed over through the snowy night on horseback. As it turned out, they were escorting Madame Teen, manager of Luomei Pavilion. She fell to her knees as soon as she dismounted, shivering on the ground. Wang Shujun, this servant deserves to die. This servant deserves death. Murong Lian was about to pass out from pure rage. If you want to die so badly, do it later. First, tell me clearly, are you blind or are you stupid? When you took attendance the first 3 times, you said no one was missing. So how was that no longer the case? Explain. Wang Shujun, please forgive me, she sobbed. This servant was only counting the prostitutes and courtesans, and she attentively checked on them so many times. They were all present and accounted for, but this servant forgot. What did you forget? Madame Teen wailed. This servant forgot there was a bedridden cook in the kitchen side room. A cook? Murong Lian was stumped. Yes. A month ago, when you punished Goo Mahng to confinement and reflection and reduced his meals, he couldn't stand the hunger and went to the kitchen to steal food, Madame Teen cried. That cook bumped into him and hit and cursed him, but he set off Goo Mahng's sword array and was cut to ribbons. Everyone was silent. The doctor said those wounds required at least a few months of bed rest, so at first I didn't expect that he could possibly do anything. How could I guess that he would sneak out when Goo Mahng broke the barrier? Useless trash! Murong Lian was infuriated. He kicked Madame Teen in the chest and sent her flying into the swirling snow. Pointing at her, he bellowed, Do you know what manner of disaster you've unleashed? All the servants and prostitutes of Luomei Pavilion were prisoners who harbored deep loathing for Chonghua. Although their cores were destroyed when they entered the pavilion, every country had their arcane secrets. It was said that there had once been a black magic practitioner from the Liao kingdom who could even repair shattered cores. So, a great many barriers were layered around Luomei Pavilion. No one could have predicted that Goo Mahn's rampage would let him break through every single one of those barriers. Moreover, it would have been one thing for them to be broken, but then a bedridden man had suddenly jumped up and taken the opportunity to escape, and the manager had only just figured it out. Even worse, not long after this cook disappeared, there had been a bloody massacre in which almost 100 citizens of the capital had lost their lives. If the emperor were to take a closer look at this, who would he blame? None other than Murong Lian. Despite himself, a red flush stained Murong Lian's pale face. He felt nearly faint. Goo Mahng! Goo Mahng! He raged. Once again, it's all your fault! He turned on his heel. Go get that cook's file and bring it to me to examine. Where did he come from? How old is he? What's his life history? I need to know every detail, down to how many women he's bedded. Hurry up! Yes. Staggering to her feet, the madam mounted her horse and galloped away in a panic. Shaking out his sleeves, Murong Lian returned to the Mansion of Beauties in an anxious fury. He tilted his head and stared, panting at the words written on the wall. This humble one is lonely, sincerely seeking wives. One of Murong Lian's personal attendants found himself compelled to offer a suggestion. My lord, what do you want? Murong Lian snapped, irascible as ever. This isn't right. Mind a jumble, Murong Lian was briefly bewildered. What's not right? Goo Mahng injured that cook a month ago, and now Goo Mahn's gone berserk and the cook took the chance to escape. The attendant's voice lowered as he glanced cautiously at Murong Lian. Don't you think it's a little too much of a coincidence? Murong Lian considered this, narrowing his eyes. You're saying that the cook planned this? That he made use of Goo Mahng? Or what if Goo Mahng wasn't the one being used? If you look at all the evidence, my lord, should we not imagine the worst? Is it not possible that Goo Mahng and that cook planned all this together? Murong Lian's heart tightened. What country was that injured cook captured from? The attendant had been worried for precisely this reason. He lowered his head. The Liao Kingdom. So that cook was another dog bastard from the Liao Kingdom? Murong Lian's back was drenched in cold sweat. At this moment, Goo Mahng was still in the palace. It was better to be safe than sorry. If Goo Mahng really had devised some unknown scheme with that cook, and if the two of them were working together to create a diversion and lure the tiger from the mountain, then the blood drained from Murong Lian's face. After a breath, he strode out into the snow. Summon my golden-winged snow Pegasus. I must go to the palace at once to see His Imperial Majesty. Chapter 24. Flower-Pluckers are human too. Murong Lian raced to the palace, but the emperor met this revelation with an attitude of pure nonchalance. As he teased the two golden beasts by the brazier, listening to them sing his praises in alternating duets of "His Imperial Majesty is handsome and carefree," and "His Imperial Majesty is gloriously majestic," he reassured Murong Lian with a few careless platitudes, then told him to focus on cracking the case instead of worrying over other matters. The imperial palace is closely guarded. Even if Goo Mahng did collude with that cook, what could he do? Pull down the sky? Your Imperial Majesty must remain vigilant, Murong Lian said anxiously. In the end, this incident is the result of this subject's neglect. If your Imperial Majesty were to come to harm... The emperor stopped fiddling with the gold incense chopsticks and put them down. Enough. You think we don't know you. Goo Mahng escaped from your pavilion. You're only so anxious because you're afraid we'll be angry and hold you responsible. He shot a glance at Murong Lian with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Oh, Lian, you're our brother by blood. Be at ease. Would we punish you for something like this? Once the emperor ascended the throne, according to custom, he was to address his siblings and cousins by their official titles. However, in private, he still sometimes called Murong Lian Lian when he needed to reassure him. The closeness of familial bonds had to be emphasized. As for Goo Mahng, if you still feel uneasy, we'll send him to the prison. It would be a trial for him to escape that, even if he grew wings. With great effort, Murong Lian calmed himself and acquiesced. Your Imperial Majesty, might the subject receive permission to perform an interrogation, should the case require it? Go ahead. Why wouldn't you be allowed to interrogate someone? Then this subject's use of torture. The emperor glanced at him, smiling, then snorted. They say it's Shizun the ruthless and Wangshu the cruel. We see that this is true indeed. Is it that you can't get people to tell the truth without torture? Murong Lian cleared his throat. Goo Mahng is a special case, of course. Enough. Interrogate him however you like, but don't overdo it. We think Shizun retains some kind of obsession with him. We find it amusing the first time you two bickered in the hall, but we'll be annoyed by a second round. The emperor played with the jade beads in his hand and continued lightly. Keep yourself under control. Don't let us hear a formal indictment against you. He rolled his eyes. One of you is an important military official and the other an imperial scion. Yet for the sake of your personal grudges, you act like 3-year-olds squabbling over a toy. Do you really think we can't tell? Murong Lian found himself unable to reply. The rising sun emerged in the east. As the light of day pierced the darkness, the citizens awakened and rose from their beds, chattering and gossiping. News of the murders in the Mansion of Beauties the previous night was immediately leaked and swiftly spread across the imperial capital, until it became the hottest topic of conversation for all the capital's citizens. Somehow, everyone, from the old and gray to children and youths, had a pithy comment to share. Almost everyone in the brothel was killed overnight. How tragic. Yeah, good heavens. Has the killer been caught? He's long since escaped, Before escaping, he even left writing on the walls. Gold and treasure are a plentiful sight, but rare are the men who can last all night. The version I heard was, this humble one is lonely, sincerely seeking wives. Who can say? In any case, the Mansion of Beauties is all sealed up now. No one can go in other than the officials investigating the case. But in my opinion, no matter if it was gold and treasures are a plentiful sight or this humble one is lonely, it sounds like a case of seizing women rather than riches. Could it be a flower-plucking rapist with a penchant for murder? The more the story spread, the more ludicrous it became, and in the end, a certain storyteller came up with this tale. There was so much unclean tea in the Mansion of Beauties that it attracted a lecherous, vengeful ghost. On the dark and moonless night, he stole into the mansion and killed the men before defiling them, then defiled the women before killing them. That vengeful ghost was unnaturally virile. He defiled and killed more than 70 people in the Mansion of Beauties before the sun rose, and so indiscriminately that he even claimed elderly official Yooeh. The tea-drinking customers were wide-eyed and speechless. Isn't that kind of insane? One of the customers couldn't hold back and burst into raucous laughter. Young Yooeh, what's brought this on? The one who had doubled over with laughter was Chuhn-ching, who was so idle that he had nothing better to do than collect rumors. He chuckled. I've heard so many versions, but yours is definitely the funniest. Defiling and killing more than 70 people in one night. Bro, I'm afraid that rapist isn't virile. He's a two-pump chump. This shattered the atmosphere of terror. Everyone laughed and shook their heads. Even the maidens covered their mouths and giggled in secret. The storyteller was terribly embarrassed, but when he realized his heckler was the young master of the Yooeh clan, he couldn't exactly chase him away in a huff. He could only smile along and say, Yes, Yooeh is right. And so, the tale of virile rapist mounts 70 in one night was revised by the singular Yooeh Ching-ching into Two Plump Flower-Plucker Kills Brothel Goers in Furious Rampage. Probably the only people in the city who weren't in the mood to listen to this chatter were the friends and families of the murdered clients, the harried imperial guards, everyone at Shenong Terrace, and the two noble masters Shee and Wang Shu. Within Wang Shu Manor, an attendant spoke with their head lowered. My lord, this servant you wanted from Leeway Pavilion is here. Murong Lian had just smoked 2 pipes worth of ephemera. He was in a good mood indeed. All right, let him in. The servant hurriedly entered the hall, kneeling in front of Murong Lian to give his report. This slave greets Wang Shu Shenjun. May he receive 10,000 blessings. Enough. Save your breath. You shared a room with that escaped cook, correct? Yes. Come, tell me about him. What kind of person was he? He was brought to Leeway Pavilion 5 years ago, the servant replied. Doesn't like to talk much. A bit of a creep, often alone. Did anything happen that might have made him develop a grudge against brothel girls? Murong Lian asked. Nothing like that. Not exactly, the servant responded. But I heard he was a lecher in the Liao kingdom who always wanted to take pretty girls for himself. Apparently he even slept with his sworn brother's wife. Murong Lian sighed. So he's a pervert. He thought to himself that the rumors spreading among the people might not be so far off. The cook might indeed be a lecherous rapist with some kind of insane craving. Why else would he keep those 5 women by his side? What about him and Goo Mahng? Murong Lian asked. Did they interact? I don't think they were ever close. Murong Lian murmured under his breath, then said, I understand. You may withdraw. After the servant left, Murong Lian spoke to the attendant. Bring me my silver fox fur coat, the warmest one. I'm going to the prison to interrogate Goo Mahng. If Murong Lian was focusing on interrogation, Then Moshi was thoroughly intent on investigation. He was analyzing every detail of the crime scene. This Mansion of Beauty's case was seriously bizarre. If the culprit was a vengeful ghost, how had it written anything? If they were a living person, why had they bothered digging out their victims' hearts? Moshi ordered Shennong Terrace to continue examining the wounds on the dead in hopes of finding more clues. After examining each corpse one by one, the healers discovered traces of concealed sword-inflicted injuries, but those marks were quite peculiar as well, which only made the entire case all the more confusing. What's strange about the wounds? The healer hesitated before replying. The water-parting sword. Moshi immediately looked up. The water-parting sword. Qingqian? Exactly so. How could it be? Moshi murmured. The swordsman Zongshi Qingqian was a cultivator who had been born in Lichuan. Really quick footnote, Zongshi is the honorific term for a master cultivator of particularly outstanding skill. Returning to the reading, and I'll reread that. The swordsman Zongshi Qingqian was a cultivator who had been born in Lichuan. He had been poor in coin and kind in heart. He'd roamed the lands for more than a decade, exorcising and defeating countless demons, but had also been helplessly naive. Oftentimes, he'd been the one risking his life to stave off calamity, but ill-intentioned cultivators had always ended up stealing his glory. Thus, even after 10 years of hard work, he'd labored into obscurity, until the year he fought the Battle of Maiden's Lament Mountain. Maiden's Lament Mountain was in the Liao Kingdom's territory. It had once been known as Phoenix Feather Mountain, but the Liao Kingdom military had at one point gathered some 100 women from who knows where, dressed them all in crimson red robes, and buried them alive amid the sounds of their anguished wails. The explanation given by the Liao Kingdom's guosher had been, "The stars say that this mountain god requires sacrifices." Really quick footnote, guosher is a powerful imperial official who served as an advisor to the emperor. Returning to the reading. After those aggrieved women were buried, their hatred soared relentlessly up toward the heavens. Many roaming cultivators had come forward to try to exorcise them, but they had all died at the hands of the maiden ghosts. Therefore, the terrified local villagers below Phoenix Feather Mountain had renamed it to Maiden's Lament Mountain. The mountain bride, all night she cried. First she hates her helpless fate. Second hates her ill-scarred face. Third, their parting does she hate, a lost love left too late. Garbed in scarlet, crowned in gold, once she laughs, face warped by hate. Twice she laughs, blood shrieks her face. Thrice she laughs, and with that last forever seals your fate. These verses told of the corpses of the countless beauties who had been buried alive on the mountain. Any crossing had to be completed within a single day when yang energy was at its peak, and the party could include no women, children, sick, or elderly. To do anything else would agitate the hundreds of vengeful ghosts upon the mountain. With the sound of 3 laughs, the ghosts would appear behind their victims, and all the travelers would perish on the mountainside. After Li Qingqian heard of this, he went to Maiden's Lament Mountain to suppress the ghosts. At the time, even though he had defeated countless demons, he had never cared to build up his reputation, so not many people knew his name. When the magistrates saw this young cultivator in patched-up clothes, looking like some nobody, he couldn't stand idly by. Even though the bounty's high, there are hundreds of ghosts on that mountain, every one of them a terrible fiend. Xianzhang, don't put your life at risk. Really quick footnote, Xianzhang is a polite term of address for a cultivator. Returning to the reading. But Li Qingqian only replied that he wasn't seeking riches. Then he walked up the mountain accompanied by nothing more than the sword at his side. His trip lasted 3 days. Just as everyone began to sigh that another cultivator had died on the mountainside, the anguished howling of hundreds of women burst out of Maiden's Lament Mountain, along with a beam of jade-colored light that could be seen from miles away. Later, when people described that sword, their expressions would grow dreamy, and they would sigh, mesmerized by the past. The water-parting sword forms, they would say, can reach as far as the eye can see, even piercing the 9 heavens. All that glitter is not gold, but true gold always shines. Qingqian had been buried in obscurity for many years, but this battle finally brought him fame. To this day, countless storytellers still passionately recounted his austere strength of character, those jade-green robes fluttering in the wind, a sword in one hand and a soul lantern in the other as he floated down from the mountain path. What's more, Qingqian had sealed hundreds of vengeful ghosts' souls during this battle. These souls couldn't have been better suited for refining weapons. Any artificer would pay such a high price for them that Qingqian would never have to worry about food or clothing for the rest of his life. But Qingqian didn't have the heart to sell them. Every one of them is a maiden from a pitiful family, buried alive as a sacrifice to the mountain at such a young age and made into a vengeful ghost to do harm. This was not their intent. It would be far too cruel to refine them into magical tools. They'd never be able to reincarnate. So, Qingqian resolved to travel to an island with potent spiritual energy in the Eastern Sea and help these hundreds of souls pass on. Because their hatred was so deep and their number so great, it was entirely possible that it would take more than a decade to complete the task. Before Qingqian left, he passed his water-parting sword manual to his younger brother, reminding the young man to work hard in cultivating and to use these sword techniques to do good as much as he could. As for himself, Qingqian vanished without a trace in the vast mortal world. The healer from Shennong Terrace spoke cautiously. Even though Li Zongshi is said to be righteous, these corpses bear the marks of the water-parting sword. Could it be that the rumors are false? Impossible. Morsi closed his eyes. Before Qingqian became famous, I had the good fortune to meet him. He was indeed a righteous man. He would never do such a despicable thing. Then could it be his younger brother? Morsi shook his head. The water-parting sword is very difficult to cultivate. It would be impossible to use without 10, even 20 years of arduous work. And Li Houde has only possessed his elder brother's sword manual for a few short years. The timeline doesn't add up. After the healer from Shennong Terrace completed their report, Morsi sat in the courtyard, eyes closed and brow knitted, carefully thinking through the connections between these events. Leeway asked curiously, My lord, everyone at the street stalls is saying the culprit is a rapist. Some strange fixation made him kill a bunch of people in a brothel, but he kept 5 beauties to carry off. Is that not how you see it? It isn't. Leeway hadn't expected Morsi to so directly refute the city's hottest theory. He blinked, taken aback. Why? Morsi unrolled a scroll of spirit jade on the table. The names and appearances of the deceased, as well as those of the 5 missing women, materialized on its surface. Come look at this. Leeway drew closer and looked at it intently for a good long time. He couldn't find any problems and so replied obsequiously, This subordinate is too dull to perceive the workings of heaven. Pick out the best-looking 5, Morsi said. Leeway loved doing things like comparing and ranking people, so he pointed at a few of the brothel's beauties with all due speed. Her, and her. No, she isn't as pretty as the one next to her. As he happily made his selection, Shizun said, Have you noticed that not a single one of the maidens you've chosen was taken by this rapist? Huh. Leeway was stumped for a second, and his eyes widened. It's just as you say. He ignored the star songstress and beheaded many of the most beautiful courtesans to keep these 5. Morsi looked at the little portraits on the jade scroll and crossed his arms as he murmured, as if he were explaining himself to Leeway, or as if he were sinking back into his thoughts. He did not do this for women. This humble one is lonely, sincerely seeking wives, likely doesn't reflect his true intentions. At that moment, a servant of Sheeha Manor hurried over. My lord, my lord! What is it? Morsi turned, frowning. Has something happened? You had Xiao Litsa keep an eye on Goo Mahn's movements in the prison. Just now, Xiao Litsa sent a message. Wang Shujuan suspects that Goo Mahng had something to do with the Mansion of Beauty's murder case, so... Morsi's expression instantly shifted. So? So he went to interrogate Goo Mahng alone in the Chamber of Ice. That room has no windows, so Xiao Litsa had no idea what was happening within, and he didn't dare alert you without reason, so he waited until Wang Shujuan came out. But then he saw... Goo Mahng was already... He pathetically swallowed, mustering the courage to continue. But Morsi didn't wait for him to finish. He'd already thrown down the jade scrolls and rushed straight for the prison without a backward glance. Chapter 25. I want a home. The chamber of ice in the prison was lightless, airless. Its interior was no larger than a cowshed, but the walls were a foot thick, and it was barred with 3 layers of gates. Every serious case involving the imprisonment and interrogation of unforgivable criminals was conducted within its walls. No gods above, no escape below. A bleak prison cell filled with the midnight wailing of 10,000 ghosts. Who knew how many prisoners had died upon the bone-chilling stone bed in the chamber of ice, and how many years' worth of coagulated blood had seeped into the cracks of the heavy, ice-rimmed bricks. Treat him quickly. Stop the bleeding. It is His Imperial Majesty's command that this person does not die. In the dim prison, the warden irritably gave directions. The healers who answered to him rushed back and forth in the cell, scrambling for spiritual medicines and magical implements, while younger disciples rushed to pour out the bloody water wiped from the wounds. The warden clapped a hand over his forehead, sighing. My God, Wang Shujuan was too vicious. What even happened here? In their frazzled haste, they suddenly heard someone announce from outside, Shihajuan has arrived. The warden nearly bit off his own tongue. Wang Shu comes. Wang Shu goes. Shihe comes after Wang Shu goes. Were they the sun and the moon, taking turns to rise in the east and set in the west, not stopping until they had killed Goo Mahng? If he were merely some traitor, they could kill him and no one would care. How many people had ever left an interrogation in the ice chamber alive? But His Imperial Majesty insisted that this person was to remain alive. So, if these 2 noble masters kept having their fun, the sucker who'd have to mop up afterward would be him. Cursing inwardly, the warden nevertheless put on a warm and enthusiastic smile to greet his visitor. Hiyo, Shihajuan's here. This subordinate was too busy to welcome you. I am remiss, and I ask Shihajuan to forgive me, and not to find fault with someone as... Low as this subordinate didn't leave his mouth before Shihajuan lifted a hand to cut him off. He didn't spare the warden a single glance as he headed straight into the chamber of ice. The warden rushed after him. Shihajuan, you can't... Goo Mahng is covered in wounds. He's not even conscious. Even if you want to interrogate him, I wish to see him. But Shihajuan, I said I wish to see him. Morsi said angrily. Do you not understand? The warden was stunned. Move aside. How would the warden dare to stop him? He swiftly turned to let Morsi pass, then followed right behind. The chamber of ice was suffused with a bitter cold. The only source of light was a faint blue flame lapping in a skull-shaped lamp. Goo Mahng lay on a stone bed, his white prisoner's garb dyed scarlet, crimson water dripping from the blood grooves in the stone. His face was terrifyingly pale, his eyes wide and unseeing. Morsi walked to his side in silence, betraying no perceptible reaction. Wang Shujun suspected that he had something to do with the Mansion of Beauty's murders, the warden cautiously explained. So he used the Draught of Confession on Goo Mahng and tried the soul recording spell to dig memories from his head, but nothing worked. Morsi made no sound. He gazed at the body on the stone bed. The surrounding healers were hurriedly treating the cursed wounds on his body, but Goo Mahng's injuries were numerous and deep. As it stood, they couldn't even slow the bleeding. "See, Shihujun," the warden grimaced. "As I said, he's close to death. Even if you wanted to interrogate him right now, he wouldn't be able to answer a single question. Earlier, Wang Shujun used all sorts of methods and still left infuriated, so he likely didn't succeed either. Why don't you return another day? Get out." The warden blinked. "Get out!" The warden scrambled toward the door, his face contorted. He watched Morsi drive off the healers one after another, and it took all his courage to shout at Morsi's retreating back. "Shihujun, His Imperial Majesty wants Goo Mahng alive. Remember to have some mercy." Shihujun had already lowered all 3 gates with a wave of his hand. The warden suppressed the urge to weep as he gave instructions to his disciples. Go get the divine tincture of life I keep at the bottom of that one chest. Once Shihujun comes out, I suspect only divine tincture of life will keep that little traitor alive." The room was now empty save for 2. This narrow, sealed world was just as the folk songs said. No gods above, no escape below. The walls were a foot thick, separating those within from the rest of the world, leaving only Goo Mahng and Morsi. Morsi walked to the side of the bed, lowering his lashes to look at Goo Mahng's face. After a few moments of stillness, he abruptly reached out and lifted him to sitting. "Goo Mahng." Morsi's mouth opened and closed slightly. His face was still as stagnant water, but his hands were trembling. "You'd better wake up." Goo Mahng's only response was to stare from those unfocused eyes. Both the Draught of Confession and the soul recording spell devastated their target's mind. It wasn't so bad if they obediently confessed, but if they happened to resist, they would feel as if their organs were burning and their innards were tearing apart. Many strong, unyielding individuals might withstand beating and torture, but these 2 truth-telling techniques could still drive them crazy. Furthermore, Morsi knew that the Liao Kingdom often cast forbidden secret-keeping spells on the bodies of their soldiers and generals to keep military secrets from being divulged. If such forbidden Liao techniques had clashed with Murong Lian's soul-recording spell, they would doubtless result in double the agony. Morsi swallowed thickly. This was the first time he had seen what an interrogation did to Goo Mahng with his own eyes. It hurt. It hurt so much. Goo Mahng had betrayed him, had tried to kill him. His hands were stained with blood, and his crimes could never be pardoned. But this was also the man who had once abandoned everything before the throne, caring nothing for his life, his rank, or his future prospect, as he fearlessly shouted at the emperor merely so the soldiers could be properly buried. This was also the man who had once kept Morsi company by a bonfire, roasting meat and chatting with him, smiling at and teasing him, as Morsi sat, wordless, by his side. This was also the man who had once, in bed, murmured to Morsi that he loved him. That spirited, valiant war god's body had seemed as if it would never cool. That youthful, brilliant young man had seemed as if he would blaze passionately all his life. Yet all that remained was this scarred and wounded ruin in front of Morsi's eyes. At that, a thought occurred to Morsi clear as day. He had been away from the capital for a full 2 years. In that time, how many interrogations of this sort had taken place? So many people wanted to pry words from Goo Mahng's mouth and obtain the secrets of the Liao Kingdom. Exactly how many times had he been brutalized beyond the pains of death? How many times had Goo Mahng's agonized howling gone unheard? As Morsi's pain deepened, his reason was swiftly disappearing. The two of us will always be together, no matter how hard. I will endure until the end. Shudi. Morsi squeezed his eyes shut, suddenly no longer able to bear it. Clenching his jaw, he pulled Goo Mahng into his arms. Radiance gathered in his hands as he pressed them against Goo Mahng's back and passed the purest, most potent spiritual energy he possessed into that blood-stained body. Morsi knew he shouldn't do it. He would be discovered, and he had no way to explain why he'd rushed in to personally heal Goo Mahng's wounds. He understood that he should give Goo Mahng over to the prisoner's healers. These people wouldn't defy the Emperor's orders and let Goo Mahng come to further harm, and Murong Lian's work might not have been fatal. But Morsi couldn't hold back. His heart seemed to have been snatched away and torn apart, tormented as it had been by more than a decade of love and hatred, unanswered yearning and stubborn attachment. It was as though, if he didn't take hold of this body before him, if he didn't personally pass him spiritual energy, he would be the one to die in this chamber of ice. Most of the wounds on Goo Mahng's body had come from Murong Lian's holy weapon, and they healed with awful slowness. In the process of stopping the bleeding and treating Goo Mahng's injuries, Morsi's military boots were almost entirely soaked. As Goo Mahng's limbs gradually began to recover, he unconsciously began to shudder, his bloody hands quivering incessantly. After a long while, Goo Mahng started to mumble, I don't know anything. Morsi had been silent this whole time, not saying a single word as he held Goo Mahng. He didn't dare to be too intimate, as if any closeness were a colossal sin, but he refused to let go. He felt his own heart would stop if he did. He closed his eyes, slowly sending vigorous spiritual energy into Goo Mahng's body. Other than Goo Mahng's half-conscious mumbling, there were no other sounds in the chamber of ice. Eventually, amid this hush, Morsi heard him mutter something new. I want a... Morsi was stunned. What? Goo Mahng's voice softened further, almost as faint as a mosquito's buzz, tearful, trembling, shaking. Home. The final word drifted down, soft as willow fluff, but it exploded in Morsi's ears like a clap of thunder. Morsi stared down at Goo Mahng's face and found that his eyes were tightly closed. His long, dark lashes, laid over the purplish shadows below his eyes, were wet. Goo Mahng had choked out those words in a dream. Many years ago, Morsi had once kissed Goo Mahng's fingers in the throes of love and desire and said earnestly, I've been named Shizun by the Emperor. In the future, I'll never need to bow to my uncle's whims again. No one can make me do anything. No one can stop me from doing anything. I will achieve everything that I promised you. Wait for me. I mean it. Before this moment, Morsi had never dared to speak of meaning it or the future to Goo Mahng, because Goo Mahng had always looked as if he didn't care and like he didn't believe him. But on that day, Morsi became Shizun. He was no longer merely the young Mo-gongzi under the thumb of his uncle. He finally had the courage to promise a future to his beloved, as if he'd saved up long enough to afford a presentable treasure and was carefully and cautiously offering it to the one he loved with wholehearted delight in hopes it would be accepted. Morsi wanted to carve out his entire heart. He wanted to swear all the oaths in the world just for a word of acknowledgement from Goo Mahng. Morsi had said so many things that day in their bed. Goo Mahng had smiled as he patted Morsi's hair, and he let Morsi fuck him relentlessly, unstoppably. He seemed to listen and to understand everything, yet he also seemed to find his little Shirdi merely adorable, a little dummy. No matter how fierce Morsi became, no matter if he was or wasn't Shizun, His Goo Mahng would cherish and indulge him for a lifetime. "What do you like? What do you want?" Morsi asked. Goo Mahng didn't say anything, didn't ask for anything. In the end, after the point Morsi couldn't count how many times he'd come inside Goo Mahng, after he'd fucked Goo Mahng into tearful delirium, Goo Mahng spoke. Whether because his thoughts were scattered or because he was completely spent, Goo Mahng tilted his head back to gaze at the inky swirls of the Hui pattern canopy and mumbled, I want a home." Morsi was stunned. He suspected he would never in his life forget Goo Mahng's expression when he said these words. Goo Mahng had always been such a smiling, carefree man, but when he said this, he didn't dare to look Morsi in the eye. He was such a confident person, but in that moment, only hesitance and fear remained. It was as if Goo Mahng was begging for something unspeakably precious, pleading for a fantasy he could never hope to attain. After saying this, Goo Mahng closed his eyes, tears rolling down from his reddened rims. Morsi wasn't quite sure whether they were the tears Goo Mahng usually shed when they went to bed. Morsi realized then, with impossible clarity, that the invincible General Goo was, in the end, still an orphaned slave. He had been beaten and cursed at for more than 20 years, without a true home that he could call his own, without a single person he could call family. Morsi felt a painful pressure in his heart, an unbearable ache. He leaned down, pressing his lips to Goo Mahng's wet and trembling mouth. In the spaces between their gasping breaths, he stroked Goo Mahng's hair and whispered, "Okay, I'll give it to you. I will give it to you. I will give you a home. This is the first time you've asked me for anything. Even if it's a joke, even if it's nonsense, I'll take it seriously. I know your life's been horribly hard. So many people have bullied you, toyed with you, so you don't dare accept what others give you. You don't dare believe what others promise you. But I would never lie to you. Wait for me. Wait for me. I'll do my best. Upon the battlefields of blood, I'll make my name. I'll use all my war-won merits for the right to be with you. Wait for me. I will give you a home." Morsi's past self had fervently, naively, made this promise in his heart. "It won't take too many years. It won't be too long. I will give you a home. I want to stay with you, always." Heart sore, the young Morsi had stroked his Goo Mahng face, begging him with such imploring need. "Goo Mahng, wait a little longer for me, won't you?" Chapter 26. Secretly Watching Over You. When Morsi exited the chamber of ice, the warden felt his soul was about to evaporate. After Wang Shujuan the Cruel had come to interrogate Goo Mahng earlier, he'd come out wearing a set of pristine sapphire blue robes. Even the moonstone pendant at his chest had been perfectly straight, but once the warden had gone in to look, good heavens, Goo Mahng had been drenched in blood. Wang Shujuan had left Goo Mahng in that terrible state without getting a drop of gore on himself. So if Shee martial robes were completely soaked through, then didn't that mean that Goo Mahng was... At this thought, the warden's knees went weak, and he nearly fell to the floor. Fortunately, a nearby disciple stepped up to support him in time, so he managed to remain upright, if barely, as he shakily bowed to Morsi. "Shee, safe travels." Morsi stalked wordlessly out of that cold and ghastly prison corridor, his face ashen, lips pursed. He didn't look back. Those military boots, inlaid with iron plating, clicked crisply against the icy brick. "Divine tincture of light! Divine tincture of light! Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up!" The warden's hands shook as he grasped this spiritual medicine that could regrow flesh and reverse necrosis. Leading a dense flock of healers, he rushed into the chamber pot. But before he could get his bearings, he stopped short, shocked. Goo Mahng lay on the stone bed, covered by a warm black and gold fur coat. The thin face visible within the depths of the fur was clean. The disciple was shocked. Shifu, what happened? The warden swept a glance over the coat, and his gaze landed on the intricate gold snake totem on its sleeves. His heart pounded. Wasn't that the insignia of the Northern Frontier Army? Come to think of it, Morsi had plainly worn a warm greatcoat when he entered the prison, but when he left, he had been wearing a practical set of fitted black robes. So was it possible that this coat was... Swallowing, the warden took a few steps forward and timidly lifted a corner of the coat. Goo Mahng was curled up asleep underneath, his breathing even and his wounds no longer bleeding. The warden was astonished. He had a faint feeling that something wasn't quite right, but when he thought of Morsi's usual countenance of icy pride, and then of how Goo Mahng had once mercilessly stabbed Morsi, this brazen conjecture was rapidly extinguished. The disciple craned his neck for a better look. After staring for several seconds, he jerked back in surprise. "Hiya! Isn't that Shizun's outer robe?" The warden didn't immediately respond. Shifu, don't they say Shizun is a clean freak? That he never lets anyone touch his belongings?" The warden turned, rather speechless. "Don't tell me you think he wants this coat back." "Oh." The disciple scratched his head in embarrassment. "Of course not." After a second, his curiosity got the better of him once again. "But didn't Shizun come to interrogate Goo Mahng? Why would he treat a prisoner so well?" "It's not like he's an official with a penchant for torture." Although the warden was still apprehensive, he had a keen understanding of what should and shouldn't be speculated on. Patting the little disciple's shoulder, he said meaningfully, "Not everyone is as fond of bloodshed as Wang Shujun." "Oh." The warden turned to give instructions to the rest. "With regard to what transpired today, you must all be careful. Don't spread word of it to outsiders." He shot another glance at the flying snake flashing gold on the fur coat and lowered his voice. "Remember, too much talk brings trouble." Morsi walked along the snowy main road. The west wind whipped across his face. He didn't have a coat, but somehow he didn't feel chilled. His penetrating gaze was all ablaze, and his heart thundered like a drum as Goo Mahng's low murmur reverberated endlessly in his ears. "I want a home." A spark seemed to have landed on the mess of kindling that was his heart. The flames roared up from his chest and burned so fiercely that even the rims of his eyes reddened slightly. Morsi's belief that Goo Mahng's mind might not have been damaged rooted ever deeper. Why else would he mumble those words in his delirium? The flames dancing in his chest were both torment and hope. He was so caught up in his thoughts that he didn't notice his blood-soaked boots attracting the furtive glances of passers-by. The snow fell faster, but the light in Morsi's eyes only grew brighter. He decided that no matter what, once this case concluded, he had to wrest Goo Mahng from Murong Lian. Only then could he observe Goo Mahng from dawn till dusk. Only then could he determine if Goo Mahng truly was faking stupidity or whether he was genuinely insane. As he walked, consumed by these thoughts, a sudden shrill scream rose in the distance. Morsi stopped and looked up, searching for the source of the sound. The capital was in a state of high alert, so he hastened in the direction of the scream. It was a tavern. The chairs and tables were splintered and broken, and a good number of the wine jugs piled in a corner were smashed. Aged pear blossom white wine seeped into the floor, and the sharp scent of alcohol pervaded the room. The customers were pushing and shoving one another to run out. Only a few cultivators, who'd happened to be drinking there, were still on the premises. They were in a private room on the second floor, and their number included Yooeh Chuhn-ching. Yooeh Ching-ching had a hand pressed over a still-bleeding wound on his arm, and he was cursing furiously. This was a true rarity. He had a good temper and wasn't easily angered, but at the moment Yooeh Ching-ching was fair smoking with rage, his mouth full of frustrations. Scaredy cat, little turtle, no friend at all. Being a simple and cheerful person who so rarely cursed at people, he repeated the only swear words he knew over and over again, among which even little turtle counted as profanity. Good heavens, it hurts! Moshi reached the second floor with all speed, where he bumped straight into Yooeh Ching-ching, who was still shouting with anger. Big bag dog! When the young man raised his head, he found he had happened to curse directly at Moshi. Moshi stared at him. Yooeh Ching-ching was startled, his round eyes growing even wider. Shihajun, how come you're here? I wasn't referring to you. What happened? Moshi's gaze swept over Yooeh Ching-ching. You're injured. Yes. There was a formidable man in black here a second ago who flipped in through the window to kidnap the tavern's Xiao Sui Jie. Yooeh Ching-ching spoke in a rush. Xiao Sui Jie is always so cute. Every time we buy wine, she gives the bros extra. Sometimes she even gives us peanuts and kidney bean cakes. Even though kidney bean cakes aren't that tasty, but still. Get to the point. Oh, right, the point. Yooeh Ching-ching mulled it over, still steaming mad. The point is, as soon as I noticed things weren't right, I rushed up to stop the man in black with a few of my friends, but that ruffian used some kind of strange demonic techniques. I couldn't even touch his sleeve before he slashed me with his sword. Some friends I got, as soon as they saw me injured, they all ran off. Can you believe it? They're all little turtles. The more he spoke, the angrier he got, until he looked as though he was about to spit blood. It turns out the Chongqua Youth Society is a gang of phonies. Seriously, they're all shallow. Moshi was speechless. The Chongqua Youth Society was a little group that consisted of Yooeh Ching-ching and a crowd of young juniors. A crowd of gongzi bros whose hobbies were social climbing and putting on airs, and who spent their days parading themselves around together. They even secretly gave themselves Jianghu sobriquets, things like Proud Dragon and Brocade Tiger. Moshi had always felt that this was very stupid, and upon hearing Yooeh Ching-ching decry them, he naturally added his own stern rebuke. I told you not to mess around with those people, but you wouldn't listen. Is your wound serious? It's fine. Yooeh Ching-ching wore a lifeless expression. It's just that I feel such a bitter disappointment over my brother's betrayal. Now I can finally experience what you felt, Shihajun, back when you... He realized mid-sentence that he was headed in a dangerous direction and hastily shut his mouth, peering wide-eyed at Moshi. Moshi considered for a moment, then asked, Where did the man in black go? I don't know. He moved too quickly. He didn't even seem human. There was just a whoosh, and even his shadow had disappeared. Oh, my poor Xiao Cui Jie. Shihajun, do you think he was the two-pump-chump guy? Moshi frowned. What? Only then did Yooeh Ching-ching realize that given how busy Moshi had been, he definitely hadn't heard that particular storyteller's embellished version of the brothel murder case. I meant the Mansion of Beauty's murderer, he explained. Let me take a look at your wound. Feeling sorry for himself, Yooeh Ching-ching showed him. Moshi examined Yooeh Ching-ching's injury, his sharp brows furrowing deeper. It's the water-parting sword. Yooeh Ching-ching started. The water-parting sword, Zhongshi Li Qingqian? He asked in astonishment. Moshi shook his head, neither confirming nor denying. All he said was, Go home for now. The capital has been especially chaotic recently. Unless you have an urgent matter to attend to, don't go running around outside. My dad went to Zhongliu Mountain to cultivate in seclusion, and my fourth uncle is so aloof he ignores me completely. I can't stay in that manner alone. Then go to your brothers. Yooeh Ching-ching hesitated, then mumbled, He's not my brother. Yooeh Ching-ching had been influenced by the Yooeh clan since he was young, so his impression of Jiang Yexue wasn't particularly good. He thought of him as a good-for-nothing who'd brought shame to the Yooeh clan, but he couldn't say much in front of Moshi, so he was compelled to change the subject. Right, Shihajun, where did you come from? Why are your clothes all bloody? Moshi looked down. After a long while, he said, I dealt with someone. Dealt with someone? Judging by those red-soaked robes, Shizun might have beaten that person to death. No more questions, Morsi said. Can you draw a portrait of the girl who was taken? That Miss Xiaosui? Yes, let me give it a try. Yooeh Cheng-ching asked the tavern's proprietress for paper and a brush. At once, a young girl's features appeared in vivid detail on the paper. Morsi watched from the side, but even up until the last brushstroke, he couldn't identify what was special about this maiden. Just as he was planning to ask the proprietress about her background, Yooeh Cheng-ching seized the brush he had set down. Wait a minute, something's missing. He hastily added a mole at the end of Xiao Cui's eye. Only then did he pronounce himself satisfied. Right, now it's perfect. Morsi widened his eyes slightly. She has an eye mole too? Huh? What do you mean, two? Who else has one? Of the 5 escorts taken from the Mansion of Beauties, Morsi said, one of them had a similar mole. As he explained to Yooeh Cheng-ching, a thought occurred to him. As far as the rapist was concerned, his eye mole might be an extremely important attribute. It might have even bought that prostitute's survival. He was still considering this when he heard Yooeh Cheng-ching speak up hesitantly once more. Actually, Shizun, there's something I wanted to tell you. Speak. Well, I might be mistaken, but when I was crossing blows with the man in black, I couldn't see his face, but I kept feeling that he had a certain odor, something I'm very familiar with. What odor? Morsi asked. Where did you smell it before? It's not quite an odor. It's more a type of, I don't know how to describe it. A type of aura. I felt like I'd experienced it somewhere before, but I was fighting too intently, and he left too quickly, so I didn't have time to carefully analyze it before he disappeared. Yooeh Cheng-ching sighed. Shizun, do you think he really is that Mansion of Beauty's murderer? I can't be sure. Morsi thought about it further and said, how about this? Yooeh Cheng-ching, go to Shennong Terrace to get your wounds treated. Then stop by the Bureau of Public Safety and pass on a message. What message? If my guess is correct, that rapist is looking for women with certain characteristics, Morsi said, studying Xiao Cui's portrait. The eye mole ought to be one of them. Have the Bureau of Public Safety inform the city and ask maidens who share those characteristics to go to the Bureau for temporary protection. Oh, okay, Yooeh Cheng-ching agreed. He was about to leave when he thought of something and turned on his heel. Right, Shizun. I heard Murong Lian received His Imperial Majesty's authorization to interrogate Goo Mahng whenever he wanted. Do you know about this? It seems like Goo Mahng is still useful to you, Shizun. But if Murong Lian goes to interrogate him, I'm afraid he'll interrogate him half to death. Do you want to... It's of no consequence. Morsi shook his head, unconsciously caressing a black silver thumb ring as his eyes slowly darkened. When he had treated Goo Mahng's wounds just now, he had planted a tracking talisman exclusive to the Moo clan within his body. As long as it was active, whenever anything unusual happened to Goo Mahng, this silver ring would heat up and tell Morsi where Goo Mahng was, as well as his condition. He very truly had no wish to see Goo Mahng in the aftermath of such torture again. I've already made my preparations, Morsi said. Whatever Murong Lian does next, I'll know about it. You needn't worry. After leaving Yooeh Cheng-ching, Morsi returned to his manor, where he again took out the jade scroll with the likeness of those 5 prostitutes. He placed Xiao Cui's portrait next to the songstress with an eye mole and stared at the other 4 faces. None of the other 4 had any noteworthy features. There was no way to discern further features from these paintings. But that didn't remain the case for long. As the number of missing women in the city steadily increased, Shee Manor received more and more portraits. Once they were sorted, their similarities became apparent. For example, their lips had the same shape, or their noses were identical. Based on these patterns, Morsi had the imperial guards invite every woman with these attributes to the Bureau of Public Safety for protection. Soon after, women stopped going missing. Only a few maidens who hadn't yet been taken into custody by the Bureau were kidnapped by the rapist now and again. Instead, it was the cultivators who started to worry. If Chengtian Terrace's elder Yooeh was no match for that scoundrel, what would we do if he tried to carve out our hearts? I've become too scared to cultivate alone in the woods. As the year came to an end, the usual hustle and bustle of Chonghua City ground to a halt. People went out only in groups and rushed back before night fell. And the Yooeh clan's barrier talismans sold faster than ever. Many of those who failed to snag a talisman in time refused to sleep apart from their weapons. As for those who couldn't afford the talismans, they could only cry and shout and beg at the gates of Yooeh Manor for mercy, to let them buy on credit and pay them back later. Yooeh Chengqing wasn't entitled to make decisions regarding such things. His father was away, so his parental uncle came out to furiously shoo off all the penniless little cultivators. "The hell is all this?" he cursed at them. "Who do you think you are, behaving like this before an elite cultivator's manor? Yooeh Manor's talismans are unbreakable. They're worth what we charge and no less. Can't afford it? Go borrow money from your brothers and friends." The storytellers were too afraid to tell stories anymore. Besides, the situation was getting worse and worse. So who would dare come and listen and laugh? The red paste paper outside Yooeh Lai Tea House that said, "Enraged brothel guest kills 70, gradually disintegrated in the wind and snow. Rainwater soaked into the brushstrokes, rendering the words forever illegible. Then one night, it stopped snowing. The capital was an expanse of pure moonlight. Morsi sat in ErHa Manor's courtyard, reading the intelligence reports that had accumulated in the past few days as he unconsciously spun and caressed the silver soaring snake ring on his thumb. He had often found himself doing this of late. The tracking ring felt like a secret, selfish tie linking him to Goo Mahng, and he was only at ease when it was safe. However, on that silent night, just as he was about to roll up a scroll and retire, the ring burned with searing heat. Morsi immediately looked down to see the snake insignia on the ring between the twist and turn, slowly transforming into an arrow that pointed toward the southwest of the capital. The silver snake's body began to change color, flickering and gleaming until every one of its scales finally flashed jade green. The scales turning green meant the one being tracked had been drugged. This wasn't unexpected. Murong Lian often gave the prisoners he interrogated a variety of illusion-inducing medicines. The issue lay in the direction. The prison was not in the southwest of the capital. Rather, that was where the resting place of Chonghua's heroes lay, Warrior Soul Mountain. Why would Goo Mahng be taken from the prison and be sent toward Warrior Soul Mountain? Practically simultaneous to this thought, Morsi saw golden light burst from every guard barrier in the capital as a warning bell in the imperial city rang out. Clang, clang, clang! One chime after another, 13 in total before it stilled. A dangerous criminal had broken out of prison. Goo Mahng had escaped? Well, you guys, we have reached the end of these chapters, and okay, let's go ahead and just dig into my notes straight away, shall we? I've got a lot of them that I need to filter through. So, okay, yeah, sure. We have a possible cannibal, vengeful ghost going around that's killed people in a brothel and kidnapped women that possibly look identical. What's the reason for him doing this? We still don't know yet, but it sounds terrifying. So hopefully we'll get some more insight on that soon, because we didn't get him in these chapters. Anyway, this emperor is quite interesting. Interesting in the fact that he's unorthodox. Like, he seems to somewhat want to appease the older generation, which, is why he stripped away Goo Mahng's title and everything, but at the same time seems to not give a single F. Like, the man, just the way he speaks is interesting. And even him watching Murong Lian and Morsi battle it out verbally, he just sat there entertained. Even though he did tell Murong Lian that he didn't want a second time. But it's just interesting because other kings would have been like, enough, or shut up. But instead, he was listening and watching, as it said, with rapt attention. So that was, well. Then the next thing I wanted to talk about is the Shennong Terrace Elder finally explaining, why Goo Mahng was able to summon his demonic weapon, because Morsi, and even still now, thinks that Goo Mahng hasn't really lost his memories, but he did explain, like, hey, he actually doesn't need to recite an incantation to bring his weapon about. He just needs to be extremely emotional or in extreme danger and it'll come. So that was quite interesting. Then on page 246, I wanted to share the note that I had with you guys, or I'm sorry, the notes, because this is right before, Murong Lian and Morsi decided to start arguing over who gets to take Goo Mahng hostage. Well, not hostage, but as prisoner, whatever. And so as soon as Murong Lian, put himself in the pool to take him, I have a note here from my first read that says, "Sir, Goo Mahng almost killed you today." dot dot dot. And then literally later on the same page, when Morsi was like, "I will take him into custody," and Murong Lian was like, "Why?" It said Morsi was curt, "Because you can't beat him." I said in my notes, "Thank you." And I just wanted to share that with you guys because it's just a little bit of my personality or what was going on in my mind when I read it the first time. And also on page 247 then, right next to that, this emperor, which you did mention that he was good looking. Oh, he really is good looking. Like, you know what? Everybody in Danmei is good looking. That's just what I'm going to That's what I'm going to believe because every picture I see of anyone, no matter what, they're hot. It's not fair. We don't live in that kind of world where everyone is hot. Okay, anyway, next note. I want to talk about, or just briefly mention. So now we get a little bit more context in the relationship between Morsi and Goo Mahng, which is something that, often happens in these time periods. So, gay relationships are forbidden. They are not allowed in this kingdom whatsoever. And considering Morsi's status, it's even more forbidden for him because he needs to continue on his bloodline and do the righteous, noble thing, blah, 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 blah. So now we know why no one knows about their relationship and, why the people, when the officials, when they were in the palace and Murong Lian was, accusing Morsi and Goo Mahng having that kind of relationship, they were like, whoa, 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 like, slow down with that kind of accusation, my guy. So now we have a little bit more context into that. So moving on to the next thing I wanted to talk about. It's interesting to me that Murong Lian thinks that Morsi wants to take Goo Mahng into his custody just so he can protect him. While I feel like that may be a subconscious thing for real, because he knows Murong Lian would torture him to death or near death, I do think that in that moment, he probably was thinking solely about the safety of Chonghua and its people. Because, I mean, Goo Mahng did go berserk. And so in that moment, he probably was like, for real, like, dude, you can't hold him down. Let me do it, because clearly I can beat him if he goes crazy again. So that was just interesting. But boy, does Murong Lian keep picking at his sore spot, because he knows. Anyway, going to the next thing. So we got this story about Li Qingqian, who's a suspect, not suspect, and the whole story about the Maiden's Lament Mountain, and just how, first off, hearing that the military gathered 100 women and put them in wedding robes and then buried them alive, that's unfortunate to hear. Really, really unfortunate to hear. And anyway, I won't speak anymore on that. But so now we have this potential suspect, Li Qingqian. We know that he is from, I mean, he is an honorable person, or at least that's what we've heard. So we'll see if this is actually him. Now, speaking of that, on page 271, I also have a note because I was like, no, now it's going to be true for real. Because the healer from Shenlong Terrace was like, do you think it's possibly this Li Qingqian? And Morsi said, impossible. My note here says, don't say impossible. Now it's gonna be. So it's just like, yeah, don't say that because now it really is going to be him. Just you watch. Just you watch. So then going to page 276, I actually don't have a note here, but I really, really just liked what was said. The warden who was guarding, the Chamber of Ice, it says, Wang Shu comes, Wang Shu goes. Sheeha comes after Wang Shu goes. Were they the sun and moon taking turns to rise in the east and set in the west, not stopping until they had killed Goo Mahng? I really just liked how that was written. And I wonder if it was written as simply as that in Mandarin as well, because it was just really, really cool. Now, speaking of cool and temperature, this chamber of ice where Goo Mahng is, where there's no saving basically, above or below. And we have Murong Lian, who now thinks, oh, it's possible that Goo Mahng had something to do with this murderer, the cook that escaped, and yada yada yada. And so he goes and beats Goo Mahng essentially to a bloody pulp. And oh my God, this man used excessive force, stuff that was not necessary for Goo Mahng, and it hurts my freaking heart so bad. And then it hurt even more for Morsi to have to go and see that, and just be hurt so much by it. Because, no matter the betrayal, no matter the hurt and everything, Goo Mahng is still his first love. Goo Mahng is someone that he gave a lot of his firsts to. And so you can't erase that pain and that hurt that he feels seeing his beloved like this, no matter how much he may hate him. And so the next thing I want to talk about is actually it being revealed to us by Meat Bun that Goo Mahng has received abuse and whether physical and verbal, the cursings, for 20 years. And he didn't have anyone that he could call family or a place where he felt safe enough to call home. And so I'm sure this likely plays an important part in why he had never taken any of Morsi's confession seriously, or why he didn't really take the relationship seriously at all, no matter how good Morsi may have been to him, because there's going to be that cognitive dissonance of just, So we'll see how that plays into the story as we go on, because we got 7 books, and we know that Goo Mahng is not forever going to be a wolf with no memory. So we'll see what happens with that. And then we have the part where Morsi is thinking, like I said, again, that it's not possible for Goo Mahng to have lost his memory, because just like he said in the past, I want a home, he said it now in his wolf mind. But the thing that Morsi has to consider, or okay, he doesn't have to, I'll consider it for him, is that when we correlate the now Goo Mahng, the wolf mind Goo Mahng, with the past Goo Mahng, they are essentially the same. They are very alike. A lone wolf or a stray dog, someone without love and without a home, someone who has been and is being treated horribly. And when we think about it, okay, although he has a wolf mind and wolves are usually undomesticated, let's say he's a dog, and dogs want a home. They want someone to love on them and to care for them. So it makes sense that he would say this. And the other thing is, a lot of things about Goo Mahng that, are reflecting of his past self, you can't change the nature of someone. or something that has been woven into their bones for so many years. There are going to be certain things that even if they forgot, they're still going to remember. It's like when people do get dementia. Meanwhile, they can sit in front of a piano and play songs from years and ages ago like it's no problem. There are some things woven into a person's system that they just don't forget, that are always with them. Now, two notes left. Your Chun-ching. Him not knowing how to curse is probably the funniest freaking thing to me. Because it reminds me of myself when I was younger and not really cursing like that and just thinking like, oh no, like I don't want to do that. Um, it's hilarious. But then also just the names that he was calling his so-called friends was also funny to me because I'm definitely a person who doesn't like talking about others, and I'm usually happy, even though as of, the recent years, I've experienced more not happy days. But when it comes to talking about people, or I don't know if you guys know this word, but from where I'm from, joning on people, aka making fun of people, talking about people, that's something I have never been good at. And like, I'm definitely not the queen of clapbacks, the queen of, the smart ass comments that can come back. Don't get me wrong, I'm very sarcastic. But when it comes to talking about people, no, I lose it. So that little scene with Ching that rhymed was funny. Now the last thing I want to talk about is Morsi putting this ring on himself, and it basically, did he put it on Goo Mahng as well? Crap, I forgot that little detail. I'll have to go back and listen. Um, but he'll be aware of everything that's happening with Goo Mahng at all times. And it was interesting because he was fiddling with it, with his thumb, with his finger, and it said that he was only at ease when the ring was safe. My version, he is only at ease when Goo Mahng is safe. So now we're at the point where, okay, Goo Mahng was drugged and Goo Mahng has escaped. What does this mean? Okay, yeah, that's it. That's where we are now. We are all caught up with my notes. And so it's time to get to reading the next chapters, which I am going to go ahead and say because I do remember already. For those of you who are on YouTube, they're going to be filtered because there's the sex in chapter 27 and chapter 28, maybe. I believe, or it ends in that chapter. But the point is, it's in chapter 27. So you're going to get a much shorter version, and yeah, deal with it. If you want the longer version, you know where to go. So, or the NSFW version, then again, you know where to go. Anyway, I can't wait to hear you all's thoughts and reactions in the comments section. Yes. Let me know how you're faring so far with the angst. All right. Well, I, Neiman.